Good morning, everybody, and thanks very much for joining us to another great conversation here on Time of the Writer 2021. I'm Michelle Constant, and if you have just joined us via Facebook or Zoom or the website, welcome. It's really great to have you. Now, over the last year, having gone back to school to study, suddenly I was reading all these books about purpose in life, rethinking our lives, discovering meaning. And I think that was very much in line with the time as well, which of course is being in the COVID-19 pandemic. It was a very weird thing because I suddenly felt that I'd gone into lockdown with a bunch of very corporate types and a few other outliers thrown into the pot. And with them, I started to discover my new or perhaps old self. And many of the books that I was reading were, some of them felt a tad self-helpish, business self-helpish, if that makes sense. And then I met Nic, the fabulous Nic, and I'm going to show you his book, Haralambous. And what a delight to meet this man. And I started reading his book, How to Start a Side Hustle, which was not only entertaining, but it was actually really, really helpful. And I have to say it's been one of the highlights in both my studies and my SAFM interviews. Now, what I'm going to do is I am going to split this interview into three sections. I'm going to look at the past with Nic. I'm going to look at the present, and I'm going to look at the future, because all of them talk in many ways to Nic as a writer and to the book, but also to this man as an entrepreneur. So Nic Haralambous, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure to be chatting to you. I really do enjoy it. And if there's one thing you do is you are able to keep us entertained, you're able to take us forward into the future. But I'm going to go right back into time. Nic, your first website, apparently you created it at the age of 11, which is positively terrifying. And I'd love to know from you, I'd like to know a little bit more about your childhood and your parents, what they kind of gave you that in fact you ended up creating websites at the age of 11.
Yeah, it's a good place to start. So what they gave me was freedom, I suppose. I have been a voraciously and obsessive curious person since I can remember. I've been very stubborn since the age of like 6 or 7. I remember thinking to myself that I don't believe in religion and I'm an atheist at the age of 7, and like just very focused on the things that I think I have an opinion about. And for whatever reason, at the age of 11, my parents got my brother and I an internet connected computer. And this was like 94, 95. My brother didn't really show an interest in it. So over a period of a couple of weeks, I quietly just took it into my room, got it hooked up to the modem, you know, those modems that made that funny noise. Those of you younger than 20 will have no idea about dial-up internet. And at the time, there were only about 30,000 internet-connected computers in South Africa. So I was very privileged and very lucky to have one. And at that time, there was no WhatsApp, no Facebook, no chat, other than this thing called MIRC, Internet Relay Chat. And it's basically like chat we have today, but was just text back then. And through this community of people at the age of 12, I figured out how to build a website. So I did. I just started coding. And it's literally like, hey, how do you write a web page? And people then tell you. And I adapted that to my first website at 12.
You know, you've mentioned something that I think is quite critical in the work that you do. You said, you know, you opened it into the public world and you said, how do I write a website? And then people just tell you. This whole idea of the sharing of information, which you learn at such a young age, given what you did. And I suppose one could look at just looking at common information and the generosity of sharing information. We'll talk about that later because you do address it in your book as well. But talk about what that means for a young child as you grow older.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite scary now that the whole of humanity's knowledge is in your pocket. Like, there are no excuses anymore. And I like to tell the story of my mom trying to understand how to fix her internet. And as a 12-year-old, I was a little brat because I would say to her, I'm not going to help you. She'd be like, what do you mean? I said, well, I would learn by phoning MWeb and sitting on the phone for 3 hours. So you do that. And that generation is trained to have people tell you things. My generation is trained to discover things. And the generation below me, younger than me, is trained to desire that knowledge. So what I like to help people understand through the book and through my talks is everything that you need to be something is freely available. YouTube is free. I learned to play this harmonica through YouTube videos. I learned how to solve this through YouTube videos. Like there is nothing that you can't do online.
No, we have to stop right there. If you are going to show us a harmonica, you have to, without a doubt, play the harmonica.
There is no way. You'd sooner have me solve a Rubik's Cube.
No. Play the harmonica. You got to do it.
No, absolutely not. We are going to move swiftly on, Michelle. You've figured out my embarrassment. But look, if I'll give you a little tidbit to make you feel better about that. If you go to YouTube or Spotify and search for a band called Thus Far, you will see Nic playing a guitar with ponytail on and the whole deal, and that will make up for my embarrassment here.
So Nic, you mentioned your mum, and one of the things, of course, about the kind of world that you work in is, and you mentioned it, you have to have parents who are open and interested and engaged. Talk to us about your parents and how the lessons that you may have learned from them. Maybe it wasn't about sitting on the phone for 3 hours, but there might have been lessons that you learned that have taken you forward as an entrepreneur, but also as a creative.
Yeah, I had very typical Greek parents who wanted better for me. Like, grandparents who came to South Africa, and then parents who are not formally educated beyond a matric, who did exceptionally well for themselves as entrepreneurs, who never wanted me to be an entrepreneur. They wanted stability and security of get a job, be a lawyer, be a doctor, be something like that. And it was never in me. So I think that what they gave me was this freedom to be who I was. And I think that it's because on my mom's side, she saw that in me and let me just be. And on my dad's side, he didn't know how to be with me any other way. I think they were both pretty woefully ill-equipped to have a child at the age of 11 tell them what I was telling them and be what I wanted to be. And they were just like, oh my God, fine, do whatever you want to do. Just leave us alone. And I responded to that kind of freedom. And I think it is very contextual. Not every child is the same. There is no cookie cutter model for schools, for education, for anything. And my parents did very well to embrace that and give me the responsibility that I was craving. So, for example, I chose what primary school I went to. I chose what high school I went to. I chose what subjects I wanted to take. They had very little involvement in that practically, as long as they felt like I was doing myself the right decisions.
And if you ever did the wrong decision, or took the wrong decision, would they guide you into a different space?
It's a tricky question, and I'm going to try not sound like an ass when I say this, but there weren't many wrong decisions made. I was overly responsible. What I like to tell people about my teenage years is I learned the rules, so I knew how to bend them. And I was very conscious that in my teenage years, it was about getting through as best as you could so that when you are free, you have complete freedom. And that's what I did. I learned the rules so I could ignore them later on.
So let's talk about some of those little, I mean, I say little, but some of the websites that you started. As you say, first website, age of 11. If I'm not mistaken, I think I read somewhere that one of your first businesses that you started was at the age of 16. Tell us about some of the small businesses that you've started as a youngster and that you may have grown, you may have scaled, but you also may have failed. Let's talk to that.
So my first book behind me is called Do, Fail, Learn, Repeat. And that is basically a chronological telling of 10 years of back-to-back failures. So from the age of 16 to 26, all I built was failed businesses. So the 16 business when I was 16 was just a school project. They tried to spark some kind of entrepreneurial drive in you. And as a segue, I've actually gone back to my high school and I'm helping work with them to expand their entrepreneurial course now off the back of my book. Because as it stands in high schools right now, there is one lesson for entrepreneurship in school, one hour lesson. And that is completely unacceptable to me. So I took that lesson when I was in grade 10, I think it was. And I started a business selling Greek worry beads and sold them throughout my school to the point where they got banned. I know, it's true. Just like all the Greek jokes you've heard. What does a Greek do when he gets a corner at a football match? He puts up a cafe.
You sold
And that's
Greek
what I did.
lottery beads.
Yeah. And Michelle, they did so well that the school banned them because in every class they were getting flicked around and making a noise. And the lesson there was just make one sale. That, like, the thrill of making one sale hooked me forever. And that's what set me on my path. So then 2 years later, went to Grahamstown, Makanda, and studied journalism. While I was there, started my next business, which was a student news portal that aggregated news from all the campuses around the country. And bear in mind, that sounds passe right now, but this is 15 or 16 years ago, where the internet was nascent. There were no media portals. There was no shared journalism online. We were pioneering that. WordPress, for example, had just come out 1 year before I got to Varsity. So these blogging platforms didn't exist. Then I also got into a band, as I mentioned, and that was definitely a business. Bands are hard work. They're business. It's not about music. Much like every business, the business is very rarely about the thing you think it is. It's actually about marketing and sales. So those are my three teen years businesses. And then as I was leaving Varsity, I started a social network called Big Spot, which incorporated the news from the student site. It was a social network for people in digs. And we raised R250,000. I mean, I was 20 or 19 at the time. And this was my fun, everybody's got a holy hell story. This was mine. We raised R250,000, and 4 days later, we gave it back because we had no idea what we were doing and we didn't want to burn the network. So we gave it back. We literally EFT'd the guy back his money and we were like, we don't know what we're doing. We'll call you when we do. And we shut the business down.
No, that is just like insane. So, I mean, there's like lots of learnings there, and we'll come to those learnings, I'm sure, when we get to the book in a moment. But in the book, and we're not talking about the book itself, but more about the entrepreneurial spirit, which is so much about you. In the book, you talk about faker and celebrity entrepreneurs. And of course, we see and we read and we hear from them all the time on social media. And I wanted to ask you, looking back on those first, maybe that first decade, 16 to 26, what made you different to being a faker, or what you see as a faker and a celebrity entrepreneur? And what makes you not one of those now?
Tough question. So back then, there weren't celebrity entrepreneurs. It wasn't popular. It wasn't cool. We'd just gone through the dot-com bubble, which we didn't even know was a thing really in South Africa. In South African terms, the businesses then were like bid or buy. That was Andy Higgins bringing bid or buy to South Africa and pioneering after the dot-com bubble had exploded. So we didn't really know that there were celebrity entrepreneurs. So what I understood, I didn't even really call myself an entrepreneur back then, to be frank. I was just building stuff. It was just so innate. It's just all I knew how to do was I have this thing that I must build. And if you don't like it, cool. I'm just going to keep building. So there was no need for a label or a brand. And this is also pre-Web 2.0, which is social media. It was literally, we call it Web 1.0, where there was no social media. There was no doom scrolling. There was no bragging. There was no taking photos of how amazing you are. None of these platforms existed. If you're listening to this and you can think back to a time before Facebook, that's when I was building my stuff. So there was nothing to do around celebrity type of thing. Do I think I'm one now? Absolutely not. I think imposter syndrome is too rife, and I know what I don't know deeply enough to not call myself that or even brand myself that. What I'm certain of is that I have got methods that I think can help other people, and I'm happy to talk about them. And it's a very recent comfort that I've found, that I've got things that I've done that you can learn from. And if you want to learn from them, cool. If you don't follow me. Like, that's on you. The world is big enough that you can follow and mute me. You can do whatever you want, but I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about.
I mean, it's interesting because when you talk about celebrityism and that kind of thing, what is very clear in a way is that that's not actually the life of a real entrepreneur, particularly in the early days. I mean, you've spoken about failure, and we'll talk about that because you raise it in the book again and again. And yet, for many kind of celebrity entrepreneurs, they make it sound like you just snap your fingers and suddenly you've made your first bar or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
You know, that's not the case.
Yeah, it's a farce. It's the headlines that we buy into, right? It's the tweets that we retweet without reading the context of the article behind them. We always see the first 10 seconds. And it's the first thing we learn in journalism school is you've got 15 seconds to capture someone in an article. That's why the 5 W's and an H are in the first 3 sentences. Who did what, where, when, why, and how. Then if nobody reads the rest of the story, they've got the chunk of it. And that's what we do with the celebrity entrepreneurial thing. We glorify the Kanye Wests of the world and the Mark Cubans. And there is always context that you're missing. Elon Musk is my favorite example. I am enamored with him. I think everything he's doing is amazing. I think we should be going to Mars. But do I want to be him? Absolutely not. He sleeps in his boardroom. That's not the life I want. That's not the life 89 to 95% of people want. You think you want it. You think you should be aspiring for that 1%. But that 1% aspiration is killing you. It's the thing that makes you feel inadequate when actually moderate is okay. Mediocre is fine. Having enough is good. There's nothing wrong with just having enough. And the stat that I use with Elon Musk to put this in context is if he was to give away $10 to every human in the world, he would still have $100 billion left. That's not okay. That's not normal. That is not going to be you. It's not going to be me. I'm probably never going to be a dollar billionaire because there are literally a handful of those in the world, like as a percentage. So these aspirations are a farce. They make us feel like we're trapped in this cycle that we can't get out of. And my book is trying to help people understand that you just need enough. Enough is good.
Yeah. And we'll talk about giving away money in a moment, but because it is part of your life as well. Nic, before we go to the book, one more question. You mentioned schools and going to schools and what schools are teaching. And if we look at, there's a lot of research that talks to what schools are not teaching for future kids. And what's quite clear from what you've just said is that what schools are not teaching is a world of entrepreneurial skills. Doesn't mean you have to become an entrepreneur, but like just that one could click into that mindset. What are those skills that you think we should be learning and that our kids should be learning?
Yeah, so top of my list is curiosity. And I know that sounds like an ethereal, strange thing, but we need to teach kids how to be curious and follow that curiosity to a point where it becomes part of their lives. I mean, I do a whole keynote on this, and my third book is actually going to be based on the idea of curiosity in the workplace. But there is research to show that if you teach people how to be curious, they are more resilient, they're more agile, they avoid confirmation bias. What we're teaching kids to do is tick boxes to get into a university that's training them for jobs that won't exist when they graduate. That is fundamentally flawed. We need kids to be like obsessively curious about how to solve problems and then how to take action. And we're not doing that. I mean, I like I said, at school, I learned the rules so I could bend them and then move on. Once I cannot remember a single thing from school. Not a thing. I don't remember any of the things I studied. Not a thing. And I still got A's. That doesn't mean that I was a good scholar. It meant I knew how to write an exam. And never since then have I been in a scenario where if I'd skipped a test, I then don't get my future. It's not real. So we need to be teaching kids how to be resilient, how to think for themselves, how to act in this new economy. And that new economy, which is the subtitle of my book, is you have skills that the world needs. Find people who want those skills and sell it to them. That's it. And just keep iterating. There is no one job anymore for you. There's no 50-year career. There's no business that you'll stay with for your whole life. It's about iterating your own life. Yeah.
So let's go to the present and to the book that you have written that we're going to talk about, How to Start a Side Hustle. And as you said, a playbook for a new economy. And it's published by Tafelberg. And to our listeners, you are welcome to send questions with regards to the book as we sort of interrogate it and tease the pages apart. First of all, how to start a side hustle. I think we need some clarity on what a side hustle is.
Yeah, so I'm being very specific and pedantic with this. Everybody's got their own versions. Personally, I hate the idea of a side hustle. I hate the word hustle. That's why my company is actually called Slow Hustle, because I don't like the idea of everybody hustling all the time. But a side hustle, as I define it in the book and as I'm trying to help people understand, is it's just something that you do on the side that adds extra income to your existing income stream. The book is very clear on helping you keep your job. If you've got a job that you love, that's great. Stay with it forever, but use your spare time to make more money that helps you live a different kind of life. That's it. It's nice and simple.
So, we are moving into a world where our careers are described as, there's Emily Wapnick describes us as multi-potentialists, and we've also been described as slashies. So we're no longer in the space of our parents and our grandparents. Slashies, have you heard that one?
Haven't. I'm going to steal that.
I think I don't know. I'm not so sure I like it. It just makes me
think. If you go look at my LinkedIn title, I'm a slashy. Keynote speaker, entrepreneur, author, I'm a slashy.
Exactly. You're a slashy.
I love that.
But it's so it makes me think of like an Aldous, a Hitchcock movie, like, but nevertheless. If we think about our parents and our grandparents, they would go into a job, and if they were lucky or unlucky, depending on how you looked at it, 50 years later, they would leave the job with a gold watch, and if they were really lucky, some kind of a pension. Now, of course, it's a whole new economy. It's been described as a circular economy. It's one we should be moving towards, a donut economy, just rethinking the economy. How does the side hustle fit into this new economy?
So over the last 18 months, if we weren't sure of it before then, we're sure of it now, that nothing is safe. Not our careers, not our freedoms. We thought we had freedom. We live in a democratic society. We do not. Push comes to shove, the government tells you to stay home, you stay home. So with that knowledge, the question is, what will you do for the next 50 years? And this applies to even people today who are 50. You will be alive more than likely to the age of 100 with all the medical stuff available. So what do you mean you're going to retire at 65? What does that mean anymore? It's not true. So what I'm trying to help people figure out is, how do you get control of your ability and propensity to generate money? Now, that's different to going to work, doing a job, and having a company pay you. Those things are different. A side hustle helps you look internally, and the way that my book structures this is, what skills do you have? What do you like to do? What can you monetize? Are you thinking short, medium, and long term? And how do you plan that out to live the kind of life you want? Not to live that 18 hours working to make somebody else wealthy, blah, 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 but just to get control of your financial future. And part of a stable financial future is a diversified financial future. And a side hustle is a key part to that. It's also really fulfilling when you're able to go, I made that, and now I make money from that. Or I do this, and now I make money from that. There's something that's nice about, for ambitious people, going, yes, this is mine, and I control it.
So Nic, you in the book, you've mentioned curiosity, and that's absolutely critical. One of the things that you talk about, and I know we've talked about this on SAFM as well, is you talk about a Japanese concept of Ikigai, which is ultimately the reason for being. Expand on that idea.
Yeah, so speaking about this flashy circular economy versus our parents and grandparents' generations, I think the idea of a vocation or reason for being, a holistic approach to work, has become quite a topical thing. We don't just want jobs for money. We want jobs that fulfill us in multiple ways. And part of that is understanding what your Ikigai is, what your reason for being is. And just looking at the book, there's a graphic in the book that illustrates this quite nicely. And what you have to start thinking about is, what do you love? What can you get paid to do? What are you good at? And what the world needs. And your side hustle doesn't need to tick all of those things. You don't need to find your Ikigai in your side hustle. That's a big misunderstanding of this. Your Ikigai is the thing you love to do. Your side hustle helps you make money. So you can find something you love that the world needs and you can get paid for. Great, you're winning. You don't have to be fulfilled to get the side hustle going. And I think we might talk about this later, but there's a big part of the book that I come under fire for a lot, which is, do not turn your passion into a side hustle. Your side hustle can be something you are passionate about that makes you money. But let's be clear, my definition of a side hustle is adding extra income to your existing income stream. Your passions probably won't do that quickly. So a side hustle should be something that fills your Ikigai, but fills your Ikigai in the range of, can it help me make money?
Yeah. And in fact, I did make a note of that passion, because I think it's a critical point. A lot of us think that we have to dive into it. Nic, you said it's in the book. The picture is there. You're welcome to show us. And I did ask you if you were prepared to read something that makes you happy from the book.
That is the Ikigai graph. This is I actually got in touch with the person who designed this, because this isn't the official Ikigai graph. This is some guy who lives on the Isle of Man who put this together, and it has gone so viral that it's appeared in multiple books. And his only request, if you want to use it, is you have an hour coffee with him. And he's the most interesting guy. And it was really such a great meeting. So random things that have come out of this book. So yeah, I'm happy to read a passage. It'll be a short passage from the section that is very close to me and probably going to be my fourth book that I'm researching, called The Sacrifice Fallacy. And it's this concept that I've created, that we don't have to sacrifice our mental and physical health to do things that earn us money. And we've been tricked into that. And we spoke about it earlier, that burnout culture and, reading the headlines that people have worked 20-hour days. It's a fallacy. You don't have to do those sorts of crazy hours to actually build something of value. So I'll read from that section. Many people start a side hustle because they want a better life for themselves or believe they can regain their freedom from their corporate job. Occasionally, they'll also try to make the world a better place. Building a side hustle is not an easy task, and anyone who says it is must be lying or has never tried to build one. A lot of effort, angst, frustration, and grind goes into creating something where once there was nothing. Unfortunately, a scary trend in entrepreneurial spheres exists that I call the sacrifice fallacy, and it has to stop. Entrepreneurs believe that the only way to build a successful side hustle is to sacrifice everything for it. This is simply not true. I know entrepreneurs who are unhealthy, never sleep, don't have relationships outside of their company, haven't taken leave in years, and haven't exercised since they started their companies. I know entrepreneurs who have been divorced, neglected their kids, pets, families, and everything else in an attempt to build a successful startup and gain freedom from the slavery that is corporate life and a paycheck. The irony of building a side hustle at the cost of everything you love to gain back everything you ever wanted is glaringly obvious from the outside.
So one of the things you talk about in the book, and it talks to this idea, is that if you're going to go for a side hustle, I mean, one of the issues, of course, is around the challenge of time and focus. And as you say, you don't have to work 24 hours out of 24. But if it is a literal side hustle, that you have a full-time job, how does one focus and also focus time?
Yeah. So a little bit of a plug here at slowhustle.org, my website. At the end of this month, I'm launching my online program. And one of the things that comes up all the time is, Nic, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time in my day. And my response is really simple. You don't have a time problem. You have a priority problem. And this is what I address in the book. I ask people in the book to do a little exercise that I call the Hour Audit. And it's really simple. If you're listening, start from Monday. At Monday, when you wake up, note down what time you wake up, and then for every hour in that whole week till the following Sunday night, account for your hours. What do you do in every single hour? Is it watch TV? Are you on the toilet? Do you shower? Do you walk your dogs? Whatever it is, count them up. And for free, I'll give you a little lesson right now. Guaranteed you watch too much TV. Guaranteed. If you watch 3 hours of TV a day, it's 2 hours too many. That's 2 hours you could be building something. You could be reading something. You could be fulfilling your life in some way other than Netflix and chill. There is a time and place for TV. I get it. But people who say they don't have enough time, they just don't have the right priorities. And added to that, everybody who tells me that, oh, everything's a priority for me. Well, if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. So it is important to say, I've got a side hustle, and that's number 3. First is my family, second is my kids, third is my job, fourth is my side hustle. Cool. Then give yourself 1 hour a week and do that 1 hour a week for the next 100 weeks and see what happens.
Nic, what about social media, the amount of time we spend on social media?
Yeah, so I do, in the practical section of the book, I actually talk about social media in a very aggressive way. I recently, I think this year, learned the phrase doom scrolling, and it just blows me away. I love the idea of doom scrolling. I'm just waiting for the worst thing to happen so I can shout at people. And I think that this social immediacy that we have has really put us under this pressure that none of us are prepared for, none of us expect. The businesses that we all subscribe to, the Facebooks, the Instagram, they're smarter than we are. There is dopamine triggers in everything you do online. So we're forced to look at other people and go, oh my goodness, that person's doing so well, I'm behind. Oh, that person's judging me because I've started a side hustle and theirs is better. The truth is, deep down, nobody cares about you. You think that they do. You think that they're following you and watching you. You think that they have an opinion. They don't. And the way that I explain this is from one of my last companies was a fashion business. And men would come in and go, oh, I can't wear these socks. They're too bright. And my response would be really simple. Nobody is looking at what you're wearing because they're so obsessed with what they are wearing and how they feel. So just wear whatever you want. Wear whatever you want because nobody is watching you. And it's the truth about social media and your side hustles. Then the business side of social media, if you haven't figured this out yet, social media is not social. It is a place for you to market something. And if you aren't marketing something, somebody is marketing something to you. You just haven't realized it yet. You are the product or you are pushing a product. So you need to stop uploading photos of your dogs and your kids and your breakfasts. Think about what it is that you're expert in, and then talk about that thing. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll have a very clear idea of this. I talk about my keynotes. I talk about startups. I talk about side hustles. I talk about curiosity. I don't talk about anything outside of my area of authority.
Nic, it's fascinating listening to you talk in this kind of a way. And I know that one of the things you've mentioned in the book is, and I'm quoting you here, you talk about reprogramming your brain. And part of reprogramming your brain is about dealing with anxiety, needing finance, assuming that you can't do it without money. I mean, some people say, I can't do it without time. Other people say, I can't do this without money, and money should be the first thing. How would you reprogram the way you think around that?
Specifically around money, is that what you are referring to? So there are two ways, oversimplifying this massively, but there are two ways to be financially stable. Spend less money or earn more money. That's it. So we need to reprogram ourselves in this way. If you think you need a new pair of sneakers, my question to you is why? Because you want to show them off on social media, or because your old ones are broken? That's how I think we need to be looking at this. People who say to me, I don't have money, I respond in a similar way to I don't have time. Okay, cool. Well, what do you spend your money on? Because if you have a full-time job, where does your money go? Do you have a car that costs you 12,000 Rand a month? Why? How did that car serve you in the 18 months of lockdown? Did it make you feel egotistically proud that you could show off your BMW or Mercedes? No, it was locked in your garage and the tires went flat. So rethink your priorities, reframe what you think of as success and failure, and then money fits into that. A lot of people say to me, I'm going to take out a loan to start a business. Whoa, no, that's a terrible idea. Side hustles, as I define them, are supposed to be additive to your life, not subtractive. You are spending your last Rand from savings on building this business, or if you've taken a loan, there is no ways this is going to be additive. It's going to be anxiety inducing, stress causing, and panic stricken. So stop and save. The first thing in this economy that you should have is 6 months of savings, 6 months of your basic costs, so that if you lose your job or you lose money, you've got 6 months to cover your rent and your groceries, and then you're okay. Then after you've got that money, start saving to start a side hustle. And the story alongside this is my fashion company. I set very clear goals. I wanted to start a business in the e-commerce space with 5,000 Rand or less, build it in 6 weeks or less, and turn a profit in 30 days or less. And that's it, 5,000 Rand. I saved technically 10 months, 500 Rand a month. You're telling me you can't save 500 Rand a month for 10 months? You can, but you prefer to use Uber Eats.
Yeah. Nic, obviously with the side hustle, there's the idea of the big idea. And you do talk about that in the book as well. What is the big idea? And is it a big idea or is it incremental? And I'm thinking about Nic Harry, your socks, which then became the fashion company. Is it a small idea that becomes big? Is it a small idea that is iterated in order to scale? How does that work?
Yeah, so ideas fall very firmly in this world of roadblocks that I like to help people through on my online course. We set these roadblocks so that when we fail, we can point at them and go, that's why. One of the roadblocks is I have this big idea and I need 1 million people on this platform and it's going to make me rich. When actually the best ideas that I know of are, can you do something cheaper, better, or faster than the existing services? Side hustles, you need to pivot towards the things that you are already doing, that you're already good at, that skills you have at your disposal or products you're already selling, and then do them better, faster, or cheaper. If you've got a massively huge idea, that's cool, but that's not a side hustle. That is a startup that you need to raise funding for and have employees and scale to $1 billion. But even that statement I find to be problematic for 99% of the world. 99% of people don't want a $1 billion business. They've been tricked into thinking they do. 99% of people just want enough. They want enough to pay off their bond, pay off their car, send their kids to school. That means you need to earn money quickly and consistently. So your idea should reflect that. Don't pivot away from the things that you're saying, pivot towards the things that you are good at, pivot towards the things that can earn you money on a consistent basis. And think of ideas that are just really there and present and easy and quick. You don't need to innovate. You don't need to change the world. Side hustles just add income to your existing income stream. That's it.
How does this align, though, in a time when so many people are unemployed? Because, as you say, a side hustle is literally that. It is a side hustle. Do you feel like that is not the space? And by saying that's not the space, when you talk about a startup versus a side hustle, are you absolutely excluding yourself from the startup world?
No, you're not explicitly and absolutely excluding yourself from the startup world, but conflating those two is very problematic. And that's where the social external media pressure comes in, where you tell people that you're starting a side hustle and they're like, oh my God, you need to make $1 million every month. And then you're going to scale. And then you panic because your expectation is here. And your expectation is often the thing that breaks you. What you need to do is just be realistic, understand what you're capable of. If you only have 2 hours a week, how are you building a $1 billion business? $1 billion businesses are built by people who obsess, who don't have relationships, who don't have friends, who don't have family that they see, who don't eat, who don't sleep, who are unhealthy. That is unequivocally not what I'm telling you to do in this book. What I am telling you to do is find a way to integrate into your life this thing that you want to sustain itself for a long period of time. Startups are promoting that burnout culture, that aspiration of being a billionaire, and it's fundamentally flawed. It's killing most people who are aspiring towards that.
One of the things that you talk about, and I did laugh when I read it, is, and I think it's actually critical because it goes back to what we were saying right up front, is this idea of knowledge and who owns knowledge and who owns the idea. You talk about the non-disclosure agreement, and you're quite critical of that, and rightfully so. And you make some interesting points about openness and cooperation and talking to people, the guy that you spoke to for an hour over coffee.
Yes. I don't know what it is, but humanity is obsessed with this concept of my idea is unique and special and nobody has had it before me, in spite of them never having looked on the Google machine or checked on the internet sites to see if anybody's had this idea. And then people pitch me and sit with me and say, hey, here's an NDA before we talk. And that is so insulting to someone you're asking advice for, because here's how it sounds to me, right? Nick, I trust you enough to ask you for free advice, but I don't trust you enough that I can give you my idea without locking you into a contract. How about screw you? Like, that's not going to work for me. So yeah. What we misunderstand is the value of an idea. Ideas are fundamentally worthless. We all have them. If you're watching me right now and you've got an idea, I've had your idea and I've had a better version of your idea, but I haven't built your idea. So the key thing here is stop asking me to sign NDAs, stop protecting your idea, get it out into the world and build it. If it's good enough and someone tries to steal it, you will be inspired to build it. If it's bad enough and nobody tries to steal it, then you've got free reign to build it. So just get it out there. Stop holding it so close to your chest.
And it's interesting that because the more you do that, the bigger it can grow. I just want to read a couple of comments that are coming to us via Facebook. Andy Levy saying, I'm loving this conversation. The burnout culture has certainly been glamorized. And things like team no sleep, particularly in the media, I would agree. I have been and continue to curate my life, but find it hard to keep asserting my boundaries and aligning my focus and using my time consciously without being seen as some kind of weirdo woohoo person. And perhaps you can talk to that, Nick, because maybe people think that about you. And then also Tope Adebola, who says, thank you so much for this uncomfortable but very necessary approach to the side hustle. So proud that it's an RU alumni who's doing such great things. Very inspiring. So what about that woohoo weirdo? I mean, I know this because even, I'm back at business school. And one of the things I always feel about is that they think it's cool for you to kill yourself to do the work. And I'm like, no, that's not the way things are anymore. I'm a much better person if I'm holistic,
I'm old, man. I can't go with 4 hours of sleep. Like my brain doesn't function that way. And someone said this to me on LinkedIn, and I'm going to steal it from them. Sleep is a weapon. Sleep is a weapon. And the more you have, the more you've weaponized it. Like you've got to look at it that way. This no sleep culture is so damaging to our brains and our society. We don't even know. You know how many people try to justify philosophically the science that I show them that you need to sleep? Don't tell me that Bob Marley slept for 3 hours. He's Bob Marley. Don't tell me that Elon Musk only sleeps 1 hour a day. He's Elon Musk. They are literal outliers in the history of humanity. Like you are not them. Again, that expectation versus reality. And then on the woohoo weirdo thing, this is an interesting one for me, and it ties into the social media thing. The problem with having everybody watch your life all the time is you care about what they say about your life. And the second you let go of that care, you're free to do whatever you want. That's it. Like we're so obsessed with what everybody else is telling us we should be and we should do. And we look at people like Casey Neistat or these YouTubers who are killing it. And we think, oh my goodness, I want to be like him. You know how he became famous? He was the most version of himself. That's it. You should embrace your weirdo. When you were a kid and people were bullying you because you spoke a certain way or you liked a certain thing, those people are now the ones who are the nerds that control the earth because they leaned into their strangeness, their obsessiveness, their craziness. You can't look at Elon Musk and go, I want to be like him, but then want to be normal too. It doesn't work that way. You can't be like everybody else and also want to be Elon Musk. You have to pick what brand of weird you want to be and then be the most version of that thing and don't care about what other people say. And I'm going to quote Brene Brown here. She's my spirit animal of vulnerability. She likes to say, do not take criticism from people not being brave with their own lives. Ignore everybody else. You do you, and then continue to do you. Eventually that will reap its benefits.
And certainly for anybody who's interested in Brené Brown, follow up on her. She's a wonderful, wonderful writer and speaker, and she really does talk to some amazing areas in terms of how to be, as you say, the very best you. In the book, you talk about misconceptions, and I think we've touched on that already, but there are misconceptions, and some of those things are, you talk around fear and failure, you talk about excuses, what happens, there's a whole load of things that you talk. Tell us a little bit about the misconceptions that we had. You've touched on some of them, but there may be others as well.
Yeah, I think that there are so many misconceptions around the kind of person who can be an entrepreneur, that can be a side hustle type of person. I think they're mostly self-limiting. And I mentioned earlier those roadblocks. These misconceptions are just things that we buy into so that we can look to something when we fail because we're also afraid of failure. And the big one that I cover, and I love talking about, is failure. We all completely misunderstand the experience of failure. You have to fail, move towards failure to receive your success. I'm not sure if I've said this on this call yet. I've had a few calls already today, but I have never met anybody who has avoided failure to a success. It doesn't work that way. You cannot avoid failure. It's a misconception that failure is bad. And it's a very South African conservative misconception. There's a study that I cannot cite for you. I don't know what the source is, but it was done maybe 10 years ago. All around the world, people were asked, entrepreneurs, after how many attempts do you stop trying? And in America, after 3 business attempts, entrepreneurs stop trying. In South Africa, 1. That is a misconception that we get one shot. We have one idea. We can fail once and then we must run back to being whatever. You can do whatever you want. You're only limited by your expectations of the things you want to do and the amount of effort you want to put in, going back to how much time and your priorities. So there are lots of misconceptions that I cover in the book. My favorite one is the failure one. You are scared of failure. That's your own stuff. You just need to push through it. Don't worry about what anybody else says.
Sorry, my mic is off. Talk to us briefly about cognitive bias.
Man, I'm obsessed with cognitive biases at the moment. Things like the imposter syndrome, confirmation bias, all these things that we aren't aware of that our brains are doing to us. One of my favorites is the Dunning-Kruger effect, that when you just start out doing something, you think that you're the best at this in the world. You've been coding for 2 years. I'm an amazing coder. And then the better you get, you kind of go into the trough of disillusionment where you're like, oh my God, I am never going to be good at this. And after a while, you do it for long enough and you're like, okay, I know enough that I know I'm never going to be an expert. And then while you think that, you actually become the expert because you don't think you know enough. And that ties very closely for me into imposter syndrome. If you don't know and you're listening to this, what imposter syndrome is, in spite of external validation, imposter syndrome makes you feel like you don't belong. So the example I use is when you go into a meeting in a boardroom with your CEOs and MDs, everybody around that table feels the same way you do. They all feel like they don't belong. They all feel like someone's going to scratch below the surface and figure out that they're a fraud. And that cognitive bias prevents us from taking the first step, from asking the uncomfortable question, from having an opinion. And the only way to understand this and move beyond it is to reframe imposter syndrome. So the alternative calling of this is imposter phenomenon. And everybody has been told that they've got this. From Elon Musk to Oprah, they've all got imposter syndrome. But those people, and the way that I like to look at it, is a phenomenon that makes you learn more. When you feel uncomfortable, when you feel like you're an imposter, I double down. When I feel like I haven't learned something, I learn more. And to add to that, we all know this uncomfortable feeling when you're starting something new, like you don't know and you don't belong and you suck at it, and this like feeling in your chest. You need to reframe that feeling as a trigger that you're doing something good, that you're doing something right. When you feel uncomfortable, lean into that feeling and learn more until you become uncomfortable. Don't turn away from it and run. It's your muscles figuring out what you don't know and how to learn it better.
So one of the questions that have come through, it's from Andy saying, is the key to also marketing or positioning yourself as a business? And regarding the idea of being a slasher, I've been told that it can seem like you're a hopper or you're indecisive or you're all over the place, which I don't agree with personally, but it is the age-old way of thinking. So I would respond to that briefly to say, Andy, I think that if you are applying for a job, often that jumping around does seem like jumping around. So if I am, when I was, in my other life, when I was the head of an organization for 10 years, it used to concern me when someone would apply for a job and they had only been at a place for 1 year. Because I started to feel like, well, in 1 year, you can't learn that much. And what is your kind of boredom threshold if you are leaving that quickly? Having said that, I don't think it's an issue if you're a consultant or a slashy or whatever, then it's absolutely fine. What would you say, Nic?
I fully agree with your point. If you're trying to be a careered employee, then you need to build up some level of trust and experience within an organization. I recently put out a post saying that people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. So more frequently, you're leaving a boss than you're leaving a job. So that's kind of where I leaned to in early parts of my career. I was always called a job hopper, and I loved it because what I was doing was figuring out the skills at each job that each person could teach me. So for the first 5 years of my career, I did job hop. One of my jobs I was in for 6 months, and I was like, this is good. I don't need any more. I'm leaving. Because I always knew I wasn't going to be a careered employee. So I don't think you need to stay in a job forever. I think that is legacy thinking. My friend Rich Mulholland likes to call it legicide. It's suicide by legacy thinking. I just don't buy into it. There is no cookie cutter anymore. I mean, Google, for example, doesn't require a college degree for any of their hires anymore. So why go to college? Just learn the skills. Then on branding yourself, I don't position myself as a business. I position myself as a person with experience who sells skills and products. And it is really contextual. So for many, many years, 20 to be clear, I was part of a business. I was the founder of a business, but I had my own brand that I built over many, many, many years. And this is the other thing. People think that through social media, you can all of a sudden become an expert. You can't. It takes many, many, many years of hard work, not being recognized to become an expert as the world would see you. So you can't be 20. If you're 21 and you're like, I'm an expert salesperson, I'm sorry, but you're not. You're a good salesperson, but you haven't got the experience to be an expert. You can go and get it, but that doesn't make you an expert. So yeah, I don't think you need to brand yourself as a business to be a personal success.
Nic, we've got 10 minutes and I really want to go to the Slow Fund because there are some fantastic examples that come out of the Slow Fund. It's a wonderful, wonderful project, inspirational actually. Tell us about it.
Thank you. So part of, this is a strange project for me because I'm a relatively selfish human being. I do the things that make me happy and they benefit the world sometimes and sometimes they don't. But this particular initiative was launched off the back of the book. It's called the Slow Fund. And from the 15th of February for 365 days, I'm giving away 1,000 Rand plus 30 minutes of coaching to one person every day to help them start their side hustle. I've got partners who've come on board, like Yoko is giving away a Yoko Go credit card machine to every single person for the whole year. Bridgement is a small business loans company. They're giving away a 20,000 Rand loan once a quarter to one of our side hustles. So the idea here is really simple. I put my money where everybody else's mouths were. For the last 20 months, we've been told by government, by the private sector, by people that small business is the backbone of our economy. But recently, it's been figured out that the 200 billion Rand that our government set aside for small business has not been effectively distributed. They've distributed less than 10% of it to help save small businesses. So I took my own money and I put it into a fund that is now a registered nonprofit company. And every single day for the next 365 days, I'm giving away 1,000 Rand. If you would like to contribute, you can go to slowhustle.org, and 1,000 Rand gets us one side hustle started. If you'd like to apply, the same URL, slowhustle.org, and you can also buy my book from there too.
So give us some examples. And I think that what's absolutely critical here is that you're looking for the side hustle as you've described it earlier. Give us some of the examples of some of the success stories of people that you think that's a good side hustle.
Yeah, so it's a really simple application process. I want to know what your side hustle idea is, who your customers are, where you're going to find them, and what you're going to do with 1,000 Rand. And just with those 4 questions, it's really easy to see who's thought out their idea. There is a lady in Ilovo who used her 350 Rand COVID grants to start a chili and jam company. She has been rolling that 350 Rand into a business that now sustains her life. And the 1,000 Rand we've given her is going to printing labels and barcodes so she can get stocked in stores around Johannesburg. And I love that story because she didn't take her 350 Rand and spend it on something that didn't make her more money. That's the way you should be thinking, right? That's what Rich Dad Poor Dad told us many, many years ago. Rich people use their money to make more money. They buy assets. Then recently, I spoke to I coached a guy called Khomotso, who is a teacher at a school for disabled children. And in his spare time, in his community, he goes around and finds fashion and clothing designers. He buys their clothes from them up front, and then he sells them out of the boot of his car at nights and on weekends. And I coached him, and we're helping him figure out what consignment is and how to work his cash flow and increase his profit margins. And then the last one to talk about, unless you'd like more, is a guy called Sivuyile in the Eastern Cape in East London. He recognized that his friends needed to have their sneakers cleaned because there's a big sneaker culture. So he just started cleaning them. He bought a can of sneaker cleaner and went around to his mates and charges them what he charges them. And now we're helping him actually, Sneaker Lab, a local company, has come on board, and they're going to be sponsoring him with a whole sneaker cleaning kit. So they've done some really good jumping on board with us, and the 1,000 Rand will go to getting him set up to clean sneakers officially in his community, which is just such a great story.
So Nic, there's 2 things that come up here. The first one would be this idea of networks, the critical or the criticality, if there is even such a word, of networks, how important that is.
Yeah, it's interesting coaching so many people, and I mean, I'm coaching 2 or 3 people a day at the moment. It is a sad and difficult thing that I've come to realize that building businesses is actually a lot about networks and who you know, who can help you with little things, not necessarily money, but nuggets of information. My favorite coaching calls are the ones where the people are like, I don't care about the money, just give me the knowledge, help me understand how to increase my margins, get better distribution, get sales, market myself. So this idea of a network, it is sad that you can't expand your network quicker and bigger than I am already. But it is also one of the key and pivotal points that young entrepreneurs need to understand. Start building your network in the least onerous way as possible when you're as young as you can be. So I've got people in my network from when I was 18 that I've never asked for a thing. I just talk to them, I engage with them. One of the guys who's joined my board at Slow Fund, Mike Hubert, is one of those people. He and I just connected 5, 6, 7 years ago. I've never asked anything of him. He's never asked anything of me. We just like to build our networks in the most authentic way possible and don't ask people for stuff. My worst is when I meet people at networking events and like, hey, Nic, I just need 10,000 Rand. I'm like, dude, I don't even know what your name is. Like, I'm not going to part with my money for you. So building up networks really does matter, but it must be authentic.
And it's also very much about how you engage in terms of just learning. I mean, the opportunity is not that someone gives you 10 Rand. The opportunity is someone gives you the connection to someone else, or a skill that you might have learned, etc. And I think we need to really start developing that relationship.
Absolutely, or an insight that you never have seen, or a perspective that you didn't have before. Yeah. Look, I've struggled with mentors my whole life. I've never had an actual mentor take me through. I've been lucky to have friends that are older than me that have helped me, but not mentors. Yeah. So it is a difficult thing. And to that, I would say to young people, surround yourself with people you'd like to be like. If you don't like the people in your circle, don't hang out with them. If you want to be a wealthy entrepreneur, find those people and hang out with them. Don't be jealous. Don't berate them. If you see a dude driving a Ferrari down your road, ask him how he got it. Ask him if he'll train you. Spend 6 months with him for free. Don't be negative about those things. Engage with them in a positive way.
Very briefly, Lorraine has asked, she says it's a pertinent question, alignment. I'm not quite sure what Lorraine means. Are you able to answer that? Do you have any idea?
I'm not, but I mean, I'll talk broadly about alignment. I don't think that you need to align your side hustle with everything in your life. You know, my one side hustle is about speaking careers, about speaking gigs. My one side hustle was about fashion. I write books. Like, they can follow passions, but you've got to remember what your success trigger is for your side hustle. Is it to make money quickly? Is it to build a sustainable business? Then align that into the kind of life you want to live, and then go after it.
Okay, I've got one more question for you with regards to the Slow Fund, and that is this. And this is something we were talking about off air, is people who maybe get selected for the Slow Fund, and then they just don't pitch for the mentoring. What is that? Is that someone saying, I just want the grand to land in my pocket, I don't want to do the work? What is that? Is that about some kind of weird, I don't know, entitlement that we might have as we grow up? What?
Yeah. I battle with this one because deep down, we all want to believe that everybody in the world wants an opportunity, wants to grab it with both hands and run with it. But it's just not true. I think fundamentally, most people are lazy, they're tiresome, they aren't ambitious, they don't want a better life that they have to work for. They want a better life that just arrives. So at the Slow Fund, we've put checks and balances in place, such as you have to have a 30-minute call with me. And if you've booked it with me and you don't pitch, to be clear, if you're 15 minutes late, I have a 15-minute meeting rule. You're gone. If you don't respect my time, you're not going to respect my money. You're not going to respect the process. So there have to be checks and balances in place. And the truth is, deep down inside, it's a very select few people who actually have the ambition, the drive, the execution, and the staying power to build a sustainable side hustle. We all want to, and that's why my book covers the lowest energy and effort to get in. Pivot towards the things you're good at. Don't go and build big things. Don't overwhelm yourself. Just stick close to what you're good at and then go forth and build.
We have to close off, Nic, and I'm going to close off with a question that I have spoken to you about before. It's around deep purpose. As we move into a world that we don't know, we don't understand, one of the few things that can hold us together is this sense of purpose. What do you think your sense of purpose is?
I've spent the last few years thinking about this, and my purpose is building things. I like building things. My goal is to help other people build things. I'm a 0 to 1 guy. And it is different for everybody. And I think the difficult thing, again, going back to that social media external validation, is we don't know what our purpose is because we want other people to tell us, and other people are telling us. So it's really important to figure out what your top priority is. And for me, it's the freedom to have the time to do what I want. That's it. So everything I do goes from there. Do I have the freedom and the time to do whatever I want? And if I do, then I'm living a good life. Also, do no harm. Like, that's obvious. Like, I don't care what you do, just don't harm other people and don't harm animals. Outside of that, figure out what your purpose is and then see what can stack on top of it to build this kind of life that you want.
Are you saying that your purpose is to have more time to do what you want? So it's not some high-flying purpose, I'm going to save the world. No.
I want to save the world. The world's doomed. The world is doomed. The world is doomed. That's why Elon Musk needs to get us to Mars, because the Earth is doomed. So my purpose is selfish. It's selfish that I don't want to do harm, and I want to have the time to explore the things that interest me, the things that intrigue me, the things that make me curious. That to me is a good life, where I'm not on somebody else's deadline or answering somebody else's email. I want the freedom and the time to do what I want with my life.
Well, I'm going to give you time now because I want to say thank you very much for joining us. Nic, It is a fantastic book, How to Start a Side Hustle. I mentioned earlier how easy it is to read, how much fun it is to read. Even the exercises are fun. And I'm quite cynical about these kinds of books in so many ways. So I want to say thank you very much for that. Thank you for your time. Nic Haralambous, may the force be with you, and thank you for giving us your time.